Board of Zoning Appeals to order. The first item is calling the roll. Michelle Summers is our zoning administrator. Jennifer Matthews.
Here.
I'm Alex Sharp and I'm here. David Connick.
Here.
And Ron Macwa. Here. Our new member. And Chris Bird.
Here.
Okay. The first item is review and adopt the agenda. Are there any modifications, deletions, additions?
I've got an addition to make. We forgot somehow to put on here to welcome Ron Macwa to the board.
Okay. Do we need to make that an item or we can just
Well, let's discuss it.
welcome to the board? Okay. He's been welcomed.
We'll do our best.
Right now.
I'll note that.
Please do.
Okay.
Duly welcome.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Do we want to do the minutes first, or we want
Let's see what's first. Come on.
Well, Jennifer has a whole list of things, so you want to move them to the end? Are you suggesting that? Is there a second to move them to the end? Well, I guess, are there any other changes?
Well, I guess we're going to take this variance thing off since it was withdrawn.
Well, we can just make a comment about it, I guess.
Okay, good enough.
Okay, so is there a second to that change in the agenda? Chris, you want a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving the minutes to the end. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the 15 Main Street variance application, and that has been withdrawn. And just as a little background, we got an opinion from the county attorney that indicates that we really don't have standing to give a variance for a sign, basically. I mean, there's
Standing
authority to give a variance on a sign for a number of reasons. Is this on board docs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is on board docs if anybody's interested, this opinion. And it's my understanding that there's an appeal pending. So I don't know if we want to discuss that at all or just
Okay.
on the same case.
Well, it's not on the agenda, so.
So we'll wait. Okay. Guess that covers that unless somebody else has a question or a comment.
Well,
Okay.
I have one small comment, and that is, and I talked to Michelle about it, but I just want to tell the board about it. I think that, some months ago we talked about amendments or revisions to the application forms. And, I had suggested that we basically copy the Fauquier or Fairfax's where there's a statement on the application form that complies with what the ordinance says, which is that the applicant for a variance has to specifically state how the application meets the 4 tests. And for some reason, what this happens pretty often, the actual form doesn't have that on there, and if it does, they attach some statement, and sometimes they hit all those points, and sometimes they don't. But I think maybe we ought to, again, think about revising it, because it's somewhat unfortunate that I think part of the reason that this ended up being withdrawn is because there was a misunderstanding about what the requirements for obtaining a variance are, and maybe if the form was clearer, they would have been saved, the applicant would have been saved trouble and effort and also the filing fee. So that's all. And if the board wants me to do it, I'll work with Michelle and try and clean it up.
That sounds like a very good idea, Dean.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's.
I would also ask a question is, where do we go from here?
Well, we don't do anything with it because it's been withdrawn.
It's been withdrawn, but
This application, but the concepts that we need to be looking at.
Oh, you're talking about what he just said?
basically, yes. I mean, the issue, yes, the variance has been withdrawn, but the issue remains.
With the issue of this sign, you mean? Or the issue of?
The issue of the sign.
Oh.
Well, he's submitted
And he has
Appeal.
submitted an appeal now.
but I guess that just came in.
That just came in Friday, so
Correct.
depending on what happens, I mean, if he's successful in the appeal, then I guess that'll be one resolution, and if he's not,
And the appeal is going to where?
To us,
to us,
To us.
to us.
But
And
but not at this point.
but not tonight.
But not tonight,
Okay.
because it didn't get filed in time to be on the agenda. so.
Right. Okay.
So once we do that, I mean, the appeal is, I mean, he got a notice of violation, so if the appeal, if the zoning administrator's determination is overturned, then he's not in violation, but if it's upheld, he's in violation, then I guess Mr. Curry and Ms. Summers will put their heads together about what enforcement action they're gonna take, right?
But there was also information in Art Goff's letter that sort of proposed a possible solution, and that this has occurred in other areas, and they have, through you know, references in their code, changes in their code or whatever, dealt with it.
And they could do that.
But that would be the job of the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
But at what point does that all take place?
Whenever he initiates that
I guess
process.
whenever somebody files a proposal to amend the ordinance, and then and the supervisors decide it has enough merit to refer it to the planning commission, and then the planning commission acts on it and sends it back to the board of
And
supervisors.
we have sent forward our concerns.
Actually, Mr. Curry, would you like to
Just
comment?
to inform you, the Board of Supervisors agenda for the July 2nd meeting was posted today. And on it is an item that Ms. Smith requested be included, which was some discussion and contemplation of matters that should be referred to the Planning Commission for consideration and inclusion in their upcoming zoning amendments, nothing specific. Of that list, murals, quote unquote, was one. So they wanted to talk about it, think about whether there are any things they want to refer to the Planning Commission to consider.
Okay.
Whether anything comes out of that on that topic, I don't know.
So that's in process. Okay.
That's all?
So we don't have to do that.
Right.
Okay. Guess that covers that.
Yeah.
Okay, for now. Okay, the next item is the Dawn Zusk.
That's okay.
Zook. Sorry.
Perfect.
Put your glasses on.
Well, I mean, I can see the Z-O-O-K.
No.
So, okay. Would, who's here to represent you both here? Would you like to come forward? It's more comfortable. And you could just, come forward and introduce yourself. You can sit here.
Sit here.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
I'm Tim. A smaller Tom. Yes.
So it's actually,
You're asking,
it's an honor for microphone.
Okay, thanks, I got it. Okay. So if you want to tell us about what you're looking to do.
You want me to summarize this? real quick?
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
yes, right.
That will get some of a tourist home. They will be renting it out, and the property is located on Chester Gap. Their zoning district is village residential. The planning commission held their public hearing at their June 20th meeting. There were some issues regarding the septic drain field location and the parking area. The planning commission at that time did not feel comfortable making a recommendation. So they've asked the applicants to reach back out to the health department, have Metro Carter come back out and take a look just to verify that she's comfortable with it. And at that meeting, they did table this application. Just as a little recap for everyone.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, I guess the last time they weren't real sure where the septic tank was, so, they had, well, ever since we moved there, about 5.5 years ago,
excuse me, they mean the health department?
I'm sorry, we were,
No, the health department wasn't sure where it was?
no, we weren't,
And
even the
also-
owners weren't sure where it was. But we finally found it.
The last meeting that we were or
I'll
no,
recommend.
Recommendation.
they held it off because they weren't sure exactly where the septic tank ran, whether it, they knew where the cap was, but they would not have a detailed map as to whether the tank went underneath the garden and down toward the road, or if the tank went out into the driveway further. So the issue is to find out whether, is to deal with where the tank is, and it in fact goes underneath the garden and down toward the road. So like the cap that is present in the driveway is the, I guess like the north or west end of it, and then it runs.
Away from the driveway.
Correct.
So we had proposed a railroad ties and shrubbery and something to kind of, like a 4x8 section is what they recommended to keep
Like a
anyone
rough
pulling
art.
a car all the way up front. So
Okay.
other than that, there's no reason, I wouldn't see any reason why they'll change more of the driveway, because you won't even be able to pull up. It's right by the, I don't know if you can see it on there or not, I can just show you exactly what it is. So that's, so here's the driveway.
It's about the fourth page. Fifth page. Okay. That one or the other one? Look at the next.
Doesn't matter, yeah, the next will be fine. So the driveway comes in here, the house, of course, you see is right here. And there's a walkway, a pavement, there's also a little garden, and that's where, right in the corner, is where the big cap is. I mean, it's a pretty large cement cap that they put on. So, yes, it's huge, and now it's exposed. Ever since we were living there, the owners, they weren't able to get the.
Are you renting it or do you own it?
We don't
Because
own
you
it.
keep talking about days, and so we
Yes,
don't
the
know what
owners
days are.
Yes, we're the
Sorry.
agents that are working with them.
The owners
You can pass it.
are hiring us to be the go-between, to clean it, to lock it, unlock it when guests come and that type of thing.
Kind of run with it, yeah.
May designate you to make this application.
Absolutely.
And now where do you
Who are
live in
the
relation
owners?
to this?
We live in Sperryville.
Who are the actual owners?
It's Dithia Gaddy, and then
And they live in
She has
Potomac,
written-
Maryland.
she has written a letter saying that we
They
are.
live where?
Potomac.
Oh, it's the letter indicated that it was a different address.
Well, it's also, the parents are also involved. She's basically the owner, but they kind of own the thing too. She's the daughter. He is an anesthesiologist. So there you can see the pictures.
And then there's a notation here about something about the hot tub. What is that? Where is
Okay,
that?
originally,
Address the hot tub and plant fast-growing shrubs against the property line. Is that a recommendation or is?
well, originally they had, this maybe about 8-9 years ago, the owners had it as a vacation rental, but didn't go through this whole process. And unfortunately, they had a couple of people come in who partied and made a lot of noise. So the people right next to, that are very close, complained and called the police. And so that was kind of shut down. They wanted to make sure the hot tub wasn't an issue.
Who's they?
I'm sorry,
Planning
the
commission.
gas here,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and also the planning commission.
So they had it as a vacation rental previously?
they did.
Was it permitted?
No, it was not something, they had went to whoever was in charge, just
That's
got a
what it
verbal saying, go ahead, until whatever.
You've got so many names.
I'm sorry.
So if you could put
Yes, the
names
names.
or
Planning
put
commission, yeah.
the planning commission,
Well, no.
Or no, somebody told them it was okay to go ahead.
who told someone,
Well,
I'm
it's,
Probably, I don't know who it was. This was 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago maybe?
this is a war,
This is long.
Governor.
No, I don't know who it was. Someone.
told
So they had,
the daddies.
that they can go ahead with this vacation rental. And they did for like 2 years.
And at this point, we do not know who told them that they could go ahead with it.
Yeah, whatever, they're
They
doing it
just
right
went
now.
ahead with it,
It was these
the
things,
permits,
It
Pardon?
was these same owners or previous owners?
Correct.
Same.
These
In,
same
in,
owners.
in the interim, we rented it for about 5.5 years.
And you live there?
Lived
Yes.
there.
I see. Okay.
And we just recently, March, moved to Spiritville. So now they are attempting to, they are trying to get a permit to
Now,
now.
the tourist
have
home
a
instead of renting it
tourist-
out?
Yes.
Like they rented it
Okay,
to?
yeah.
Okay, good. Whose name is on this application?
Well, they're listed.
It's application of Dawn Zook.
And there's this.
She gave me authority in the
I see
letter.
that,
to
I
send.
don't think he can do this. But anyway.
There is a letter that the owner indicates that he's, and I don't know if that's applicable or not, is he's,
Am authoring to act as manager.
Yeah, but the application ought to be in the name of the owner, and they want to be the agent to testify about it, they can do that, but the permit's not going to them, the permit's going to them. You're not renting it now, right?
Not yet, no.
We're not
It's
leasing
sitting
it?
there, it's sitting there empty.
Who's gonna actually run the, I mean, actually take the money in?
They would,
They would.
and then pay me. I mean, I would,
Is it gonna be a?
so basically you're doing
Both
the,
of-
you're doing the cleaning and the maintenance or whatever,
Helping
and
manage
but they're handling the rental end of it, you aren't
When
handling
did they
the.
buy this?
Correct.
October of 2004.
And that was the, Deepco?
Yeah, that's the same one.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might point out, it was advertised for the applicant and the current owner, so both names have been tied to this.
They are?
Yes.
Well, so how many bedrooms are in it? That wasn't on the information.
should be. 3-bedroom house?
Yeah, 3 to 2.5 bath.
And I don't know if did the health department indicate the perk as far as for how many bedrooms?
One would imagine it would.
It's designed to, it says it's designed to support, oh, that was the second.
That's this one.
Yeah, that doesn't say. Yeah, it's this letter right
Yeah, they've got it all in there.
here. But you're not adding bedrooms or
No, nothing.
anything?
So how many people do you intend to rent to at a time?
Don't know.
Probably not more than,
Because I don't think it was in here.
like 6 people, that would be maximum capacity.
For 3
So,
bedrooms,
so
yeah.
That's
six,
maximum.
Okay.
6 people.
And what can you do about this hot tub?
Well, they're just putting, they're going to be putting a 6-foot extension around it to see more privacy, so the neighbors will not be, might not involved in as much. They were a little against it, but they weren't here at the
Which
meeting.
day?
Can we just,
I'm sorry, our neighbors right directly
can you
behind
just give a little
us
background?
were,
And just use this picture here. So there's neighbors
they're pretty
directly
close.
behind that screen.
Okay.
Behind the house here, there's a large deck that's literally about the size of the house. I mean, you can't see it, but in one corner of the deck back here, there's a hot tub. The plan is to put a new hot tub in
He's right there.
and extend the deck fence that's already around it up to about 6 feet, and just to increase privacy. And along this screen area here, they wanted to plant the shrubs.
They being,
I'm sorry, yes, the gardens.
okay. Is it any other questions?
Not questions necessarily, other than, Medges always recommends on the pumping and septic system or whatever, but when you have verification of when the septic system was last pumped,
This was, 2 months ago.
So did you pump it when she was at her inspection? When Midge went out?
Well, first, yeah, correct. They had gotten, she came back after they had got it all cleaned up, because they had gone there and did,
I found the septic is
Yes.
in the driveway.
they had to put in like one of those
Locators.
locators, because they weren't,
Did you see
trying to
this?
find that, that's
oh,
where.
you mean the It's a manhole, basically, they put,
Yeah,
they
it's-
put
yeah.
in, and then put the cap on.
Oh, and our guest would be in the driveway and everything.
So Chris, do you have any comments about the planning commission on this?
My understanding, the planning commission felt that it was a reasonable application, and the only question they had to deal with the septic tank being somewhere where it could be ruptured by parking cars or something like that, and so they suggested they wanted to make sure that there was some kind of a barrier around the septic tank so that that wouldn't happen. And they tabled the motion, the application for a month, hoping that by the next planning commission meeting, this septic situation would be rectified and that they could then approve it.
Make a recommendation.
Recommendation for it.
Because I visited the site on Sunday, and now you're saying that the septic tank runs into that garden area, then, so it runs away from the driveway. So basically what you're saying is
Correct.
just a small portion of the tank where the,
So
the access path
make some type of
In-
rock
in
or
driveway.
railroad tie, mulch bed right there.
Because, I mean, you have to realize what you're proposing also is the
Yeah.
fact that I would say on this house, every 5 years or whatever, that tank needs to be pumped, and they have to have, they have to get in there.
Yeah,
So if you
yeah.
get,
Well,
looks like
we can leave it somewhat.
But, whatever, I mean, and that's up, you can build whatever you want over it because, but
That's not-
the idea is gonna take.
They had the standard,
It's all, yeah.
they had the standard life safety features, reviewed, and the applicants did agree as far as fire extinguishers,
All that's in here.
Yeah, I would like to add, I read the comments from the.
Could I just for a second, we're gonna have a public hearing if there is anybody here.
Oh,
And maybe if you're okay with that, we'll wait until we're
That's fine.
making a motion. So is there any other?
So-
Okay. Are you,
Well, I was gonna have her say what the requirements that they had agreed to.
sure.
you're talking about to the planning commission?
Well, usually we talk about working smoking detector, carbon monoxide, so what was the comments to those things? Emergency contact,
Emergency contact,
sheriff's office,
the owner's contact information, the sheriff's office, the contact emergencies, working smoke detectors,
fire extinguisher.
fire extinguishers. No more than 6 people, I believe,
And how many cars?
2 cars.
And 2 cars.
Yes.
Okay, well, Ron, just to be fair, go ahead if you.
In looking at the, like I said, the recommendations as far as a working fire extinguisher, my career was in the fire service. A working fire extinguisher could be a bucket of water. What I'm proposing is, this is a 2-story house, so I would say you would need 2 5-pound, 2A, 10 DC dry powder fire extinguishers, wall mounted, so that guests can easily access them and find them.
I like that.
And also, along the same thing with, there was CO detectors, and is there gas in the house? Propane?
No.
No propane, okay. But yeah, the CO detectors and the smoke detectors. My feeling is, because these are life safety issues or whatever, is that they should be, the detectors should be for current code, not for code when the house was built,
Okay.
which would require them in all the bedrooms, in the hallway, outside the bedroom, and in the other use areas or whatever. If there's a basement, there should be one in the basement.
Okay. What I was gonna do is open the
I like that.
Good job. Okay, I was gonna open the public hearing. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak about this application? Apparently not. Okay, I'm closing the public hearing. Did you,
And I have one other thing on my list.
who's that? Oh,
Yeah, one other thing on my list, the public hearing is closed, is that the way I found the house was, I was looking for the septic cover and saw there's no visible address
Oh, they're gonna get that.
And, I mean, I saw a sign that was laying down there, but basically what needs to be on there is a reflective, visible address, the metal sign, which has a
There's a
reflective
number
stuff.
on
So
the
it's-
house, but it's pretty hard to see. 'cause
Well, yeah,
it's-
you cannot see the number on the house from the street for emergency responses or whatever, that's
definitely-
vitally important, so.
Yeah, so people can actually find it.
Okay, so there was nobody who opposed it? Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
Well, we've got to make some findings, and I'm looking at the application, and the application says, I, we, Dawn Zook, hereby apply. And if you look at 170 170-55A of the ordinance says an application for a special permit or special exception may be made by any property owner, owner of an easement, possessor of the right of entry under power of eminent domain, lessee, contract purchaser, or any official department, board, or bureau of any government. And the Zooks, unfortunately, are none of the above. The application and the deed that's attached to it shows that, whatever their name is, I forgot already.
So.
They're the owners, and they should have been on there, and it's very nice that they gave you a letter that says you can,
Well, we were
you
in
know,
contact
sort
with
of
them.
be their representative at the meeting, but I don't think that the board can act on this because it's not signed by them, and it's by the actual owners.
I was just going on by what she has.
All right, I understand. All right, you're telling us sort of, I understand, and I mean, I'm just saying, what they've got is just a letter. It's not notarized, it's not a power of attorney, and I don't think if they're acting on behalf of them, they have to have that. So maybe they want to fix that up and amend it,
And then the planning commission
and
gets
then-
another.
and then they can have their bite at the apple, and everyone will live happily ever after, I suppose.
Okay.
But I mean, that's what it
I mean,
says.
it makes sense, of course.
And I agree with what you're saying, is that it says that, but on our application, why does it have owner, lessor, or agent?
I don't know why it says that, because, well, I mean, an agent could sign it, but the applicant, for example, an attorney could sign it, or someone acting under a power of attorney could sign it as an agent, but the name of the applicant's got to be the owner.
So,
And, I mean,
right.
and the other thing is,
Oh, okay.
and the other thing is, if
I see.
If they're authorizing you to talk for them, or to talk for them is fine, and you have that letter, but I mean, if they're authorizing you to sign things, you have to have a notarized power of attorney,
Okay.
I think. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but that's the way I read the application requirement. So I move to table it and let them have a chance to amend it.
Now,
And
just
fix that up.
to follow up on that, if it said I'm authorizing them to represent her on the application as her agent, is that?
Well, then you get into this issue of, as long as they're making factual, as long
It says
as they're
agent.
okay, as long as they're making factual or talking about the facts, which they have done here, they can do that if they're authorized. But how do you know, or how do we know as a board, that's who signed that letter? It's not notarized.
Well,
So it's not really a legal document. It's just a letter signed by someone that, did you see them sign that?
She signed
So
it.
you don't, so you can't even say of your own personal knowledge that the owner signed the letter.
I met with,
Right,
them
right,
on
okay.
several occasions. I know they're real people.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm just saying the order, and I'll tell you why it's in there that way. It's not for no reason, because sometimes, and the reason for a letter like that, what if some contract purchaser, somebody says, I'm gonna buy your thing, and then they go and apply for some special use permit to do something that you don't know, or worse than a special use permit, they could apply for rezoning.
but a contract purchaser can do that.
Okay, but they have to have the permission of the owner, because it could affect the taxes, it could affect the zoning of the property, and then they could get the zoning and then say, well, then our financing fell through, and the owner that possibly if you just let somebody who doesn't have a proper authority to do it, could do something that changes the value or the tax or the assessment on the property, and then they disappear and the owner's stuck with it. The owner could come and say, I never authorized them to apply for that, and we live in Potomac, we don't get the Rappahannock News, we didn't even know they were doing that. And I mean, I don't think that's really what happened, but that's the reason it's the way it is, to make sure that that
That's
doesn't
why we have
happen.
notaries.
Okay, I think you've made your point.
So that's my motion to table it and give them a chance to fix it up.
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion on that motion? So the motion is to table the application till next month, and you will seek specific.
A notarized letter.
Well, if
Is
you
that
want to
correct?
have a question about it, you can, I'm the secretary of the board, you can contact me, I'll tell you what
So
you
you-
gotta do or I'll.
Okay, so you'll get something, and you should probably have that, you could show that to the planning commission as well.
Okay.
And then you could share
We'll
this,
work on your punch list of things that you've got to get done.
and you could share this
If
information.
Maybe by then you'll have
But,
something from Mitch, so.
I mean, to get the smoke detectors and the fire extinguishers, the
Okay,
chemical
so you,
fire extinguishers on
you
the.
know what you have to do.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Before we leave this topic, I mean, y'all can go if you want. I want to talk about this business with the planning commission that I put in my note to them.
Okay, you can,
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm really concerned, and I've addressed it to Mr. Curry, and I've addressed the chairman of the planning commission of this new procedure whereby they're dragging these permits reviews out for now 2 months. First, they have a preliminary meeting and decide whether to have a public hearing, and then they have a public hearing. Like this particular application, look, it was filed April 12th, and here it is,
June.
June
Not
20, whatever, it's almost 3 months, well, 1, 3 to 7, yeah, it's a few days short of 3 months, and now it's gonna be 4 months by the time they get their permit. And, I mean, my own view of reading the statute is, as I said, I don't think that the planning commission is required to have a public hearing on these kind of applications. And they're supposed to, these things are supposed to come to us. We, or the zoning administrator, sends a copy of it to the planning commission for whatever recommendation they want to make, if any, and is supposed to tell them the BZA is going to review this at their meeting on, usually, if this came in on the 12th, I would say it would have come up at the May meeting, and that's when we're going to hear it. And if you want to make a recommendation, either A, put it in writing and send it to us, or tell our delegate or something, or our representative, what it is before our meeting, or you can appear at the hearing. That's in the statute. They can designate somebody to appear and say what the recommendation is. But this business of them, the health department, personally, I think the purpose of the planning commission to review it is to see if it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan. No more, no less. Not to go through all the stuff that we're supposed to go through, like the health department and the highway department and all these other things are really our business, not the planning commission's, and yet they sort of have injected themselves into the process, and to the point that they're making recommendations every time, despite how many times they've been reminded, they only have recommendation authority, that they're going to approve it or not to approve it, instead of recommend to us what to do. They're supposed to be an assistant to us, and they're, while they may have very nice intentions, they're bogging down the whole process. And I just have to say, I don't think it's fair to applicants to have to wait 3 months for something that, if it hadn't been for some of these little issues, this could have been passed, this could have been approved in 1 month. After 2 meetings.
Okay, but this particular meeting, it was advertised prior to the planning commission hearing it.
Well, no, they had heard it one time.
Okay, but let's just say this time.
Okay.
So it was advertised for us to hear it, so I think it's reasonable for us to open the hearing and decide what we want to do, which I think is.
Right, but what he's saying,
No, but
there's
I
a
think-
slow flow through the planning
No.
Well,
commission.
now they've got it to, now they're following this procedure where they say they have to consider it at 2 successive meetings. the first meeting to see if it's complete enough to have a public hearing. Then at the second meeting, they have their public hearing, which I think is not even required. And we discussed that at the last meeting or the meeting before. And I don't think there's any basis in the law for this. There's something in our zoning ordinance that says at its first meeting, the planning commission will review it and decide if a public hearing is required.
Which would be by.
But it's not required by law, and if it's not required by law, what else could require it? So they don't have to have a public hearing.
But I think you can assume they're going to have a public hearing.
Well, I mean, they can have a meeting and have people comment on it if they do whatever they want, but what I'm saying is, they're making up all these flaming hoops they have to jump through before they send it on to us. When they're in fact not sending it on to us, we send it to them for a recommendation and that's it. Make it or pass.
It would seem to me this is a scheduling problem more than a hearing problem. And I happen to completely agree with Mr. Connick about this, that it is being belabored and done unnecessarily, it's repeated unnecessarily. The one aspect of having the Planning Commission hear these applications, which I think is often very helpful for the applicants, is that they can understand.
You're talking about reviewing.
Reviewing it is that they can understand what the problems are that they will have to address at the BZA meeting, and what the neighbors think and the other problems that may or may not be involved with their application. And often that seemed forewarned is forearmed, and so they have a week to get it together where they didn't otherwise. And so what I would think is in the way of dealing with this is to, instead of scheduling the meeting twice before the Planning Commission, to go back to the old format that we had before, which was the Planning Commission would hear it on the, let's say, the third Wednesday, the BZA would hear it on the fourth Wednesday. It could all be done within a month if they got their application in timely enough to deal with the.
So you're talking about.
We have also worked on getting point by point what they were going to need for the various things, and maybe we need to revisit the variance, put those four thresholds in for the variances, so we can get that, and maybe it needs to be published from time to time in the newspaper or something, or put online where the people can see what they have to do. And if we want to get a little more specific, because we've got more expertise now about the type of fire extinguisher, so it's not a bucket of sand or a bucket of water, then they'll know that they have to have that in every room or every living circulating place and so on, so that they know what they have before they even get to the Planning Commission. Because and sometimes, I mean, we've talked about now it's 4 months, but there are others that have been in that 4 or 5 month range recently. And I do agree that they're to be looking at how it complies or is in alignment with the comprehensive plan.
I mean, personally, I don't see the problem with that initial review and then advertising it. I mean, I think that's fine.
But is that something that Michelle could be doing in a review if she's got her little punch list of what she can go down?
It would seem if we had a proper application, the zoning administrator.
But Chris, you did say you thought that was very helpful.
Well, it is for having one meeting.
On week 3, and then we hear on week 4.
As it is now, you have the preliminary meeting, the secondary meeting, and then the BZA meeting. And what I would say is make it one Planning Commission meeting. And
I vote yes.
I would think an informational brochure that people would be given that would sort of a guide to how to be successful. And that, because we have it all the time, is that talk to your neighbors. That's important. But a lot of people come in and they don't realize that or whatever, and that, creates lots of problems or whatever. Whereas if the brochures said, one of the things that is important in your, application process or whatever is to go to your neighbors and explain them what you're doing. It would make it a whole lot easier on the applicants.
Better to meet them before than at the meeting.
Correct.
Okay, so, but then we don't necessarily make that decision. We can make we can try to follow and work.
Well,
with-
we make it,
And just if I may, and I pointed out to the planning commission, discuss this section with them. This is a matter of ordinance, so, planning commission is a creature of state code, and state code enables localities to put in these ordinances to manage the zoning process. So nothing that you're saying doesn't make sense, but if you're gonna change the process, it needs to be aligned with the ordinance. And so-
You changed the process, you're the instigator of this whole
Hold
thing.
on, hold on.
When you, based on that section 55E, and it only says may, they can have it if it's deemed necessary. Well, how do they deem it necessary or not
But they
necessary?
So you'd ask the planning commission that question, but ultimately.
I did, and they just ignored me. I've asked it twice, and they just ignored me both
Okay,
times.
let's let him speak.
But the process is intended to follow the local ordinance, and if the BZA, planning commission board, don't like the local ordinance, there's a process for that. And I think.
But there's nothing wrong with the ordinance. The ordinance says they will schedule a public hearing if it is deemed necessary. Well, the state law doesn't require it, and neither does the ordinance.
But
And
you-
nobody's ever said, except Gary Light announced that, well, he got an opinion, he didn't say from who, that it was okay. And I don't think it is. And I wrote it, and I'm not gonna belabor it again, but it's not in the code. The code speaks of a public hearing, one public hearing per application. A public hearing or the public hearing, not the public hearings. There's only one at either this board or the Board of Supervisors. That's it.
If
That's the
legal
public
opinion
hearing.
wasn't shared to the BZA, it should be,
What's that?
the legal opinion that.
From who?
Okay.
I think we're off track from our agenda.
No, we are a little bit.
Well, I think we need to get it straightened out, and I don't know if should we make a motion to have Chris tell the planning commission that? Or personally, I
Wait,
think you
hold on.
as chairman ought
Hold on.
to talk to Mr. Light about it and get
Yeah,
it
the
straightened
question
out.
is, he's got a legal opinion?
Who?
Gary Light, is that what you're saying?
There is a legal opinion, yeah, it's from the
Okay.
county attorney's office.
Could we get that to me?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, or get that to us as a board?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, let's do that, and then we'll talk about it
Okay.
next time. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Greenwell Tourist Home. Who's here to represent? Yeah, you can come forward if you'd like. If they stray forward, I guess it's okay. Okay, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Amanda Greenwell, and those are our boys, Trey and Logan.
Which is which?
Trey is the oldest one.
Okay.
George the third, Trey
Okay.
for short, and Logan
Okay.
is the youngest one.
Nice.
So we are here applying for a tourist home. We're with 40-acre property since 2016. We've been out there every week since we bought the place. We did, I think Mr. Connick and Mr. Bird heard our opening speech last week, where, I just talked about how much we care about this community, how much we care about the area, the property. My husband has worked really, really hard to basically get the property in working order. It's been vacant for a long time before we bought it. So we've been working on a lot of trails and just cleaning up around the pond, and we love the area. The boys have been able to make a lot of great memories already as a family. We plan to retire here someday. We're here for the long haul. We did not know about the requirements for the special use permit when we were first looking at doing this Airbnb piece. The property taxes have gone up. Our boys started sports, so we thought just part-time when we weren't able to use it, we could put it up for part of that use. As soon as we got the letter from the Treasury, the treasurer, we called and made sure that we got the information that was needed in terms of what we needed to do to be in compliance, and talked to Michelle and went through all of that. And I think, as you've alluded to, it's been quite a process to make sure that we've been in compliance, but we've done everything that's been asked. We are still waiting for DOT to come out and check that. We have confirmation that the paperwork is in, so they do have that. The commission last week had a couple of things that they want us to address, and we're in complete agreement with that. We're actually in compliance with all the safety pieces already, so we need to just deal with the well, and we're happy to do that and answer whatever other questions you got.
And I will note that with this application as well, any of these applications that come in, the applicant does submit it to VDOT, I submit it as well, and we have had no luck getting responses back on these type of applications.
From VDOT.
Yes,
This warranty?
yes.
Doesn't VDOT look on these, that's my understanding, VDOT looks on these as it's more of an intense use, if it's less than eight people or something like that, than a single-family residence. So if it's already got an entrance there, unless they're building a new place, and it's already got an entrance permit or a grandfathered entrance, they don't have any, they
So
don't
this
do
is
anything
the
there.
only house on the property?
Does your, how wide is your driveway?
10, 12 feet.
Is it a
Right.
commonly shared right-of-way driveway?
Right.
It's private.
It's a
Private drive.
Private
It's not
drive.
a regular.
It's right up there in that
On
little.
that property.
Okay.
You can't see it from the road.
And on the screen is the additional conditions that the planning commission recommended to this board. And the applicants have agreed with.
Yeah, we already
with
have
of
all the
these.
safety pieces intact, and then for the well, like I said, we have to do the well upgrade, we have that in the works.
Now, the no firearms, you're not allowed to shoot them, or just?
That's for the, yeah, for the renters.
For renters, he
Yeah.
obviously, he's a previous
Just for the renters.
sniper, so. he-
Not private renters.
Well, that could be.
You're not
That
gonna
was
do
something that the Al Henry of the planning commission
But
specified.
no possession of firearms?
No, not to shoot firearm, the people that rented it were not to
So which
No
is,
discharge
hunting, no
firearms
use of
on the
firearms.
property.
so when you say no firearms,
That would-
no,
Be for the people residing in the tourist home, not the property
no, I
owners.
understand
The
that,
tenants.
but you don't want them shooting firearms, but what?
Correct.
We can adjust that to say no firearms and or shooting of firearms.
Except in self-defense.
It's hard to know
Well,
when people have
well,
firearms unless they shoot.
I mean, how can you
Yeah, no
tell?
firearms on the property.
You can
How you frisk them or something?
just look at it.
Okay,
Well,
okay, I got you.
So how often do you believe that you will have this property for rent as an Airbnb?
probably, depending on the month, 5 days max a month, 5, 6 days max.
So that's a Friday, Saturday,
Yeah.
Sunday,
Yeah.
and then like twice a month?
Yeah, and like I said, we want to use it as much as possible. We've been out here every week, and the only reason we were looking at this, like I said, the increased property taxes and the boys starting sports, there were some weekends that we couldn't. So we thought, well, why don't we help offset our costs when we can't use it? We've actually, again, for the summer this past year, I mean, we were out here every weekend, so we really actually don't
Where do
want
you
many
live?
people out. Alexandria, Virginia, full time.
This was
So we'd like to be able to just have it as an option, like I said,
Certainly.
so.
from that
Are we
gentleman.
gonna do a public hearing and then discuss it, or are we
Yeah.
gonna discuss it?
We can discuss it some and then do the public hearing.
Okay.
Go ahead, if you have any questions.
Yeah, it's fine. I have questions. I'm familiar with this property. I've been in the house and whatever.
Everybody's been in this place out there.
How many bedrooms did the house have when you bought it?
3.
3 bedrooms on that.
It had 3,
Yes.
okay? Because the last time I was in it, which was in 16, it had 2. And the information from the county on the assessment of the property listed it as a 2-bedroom house. So I was wondering where the 3rd bedroom came from.
We bought it directly from the Potters, and
When
this
was
was
that? How long do you have?
October 2016. And so they had
I
been
was in
renting
a
it
showroom
out
before that.
before.
And it was a 2-bedroom house.
And so no, that, we have not changed anything in terms of the
Well, was
actual
there
bedrooms in the
a
back.
room that was a family room or something like that that's been converted
There
over?
were 2 bedrooms and a bath. When I was in there, that's what I saw when I was in there. And in fact, I checked with the real estate agent I was with today, and she said the same thing. It was a 2-bedroom house. And the county information on it was a 2-bedroom house.
It was sold as a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and we actually got an appraisal on it. That was
Not from Al
done,
Henry.
sorry?
Not from Al Henry.
Not from Al Henry, no. I said not from Al Henry. And that has it as a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, when we had it appraised before we bought the property in October 2016.
Okay. Did it have air conditioning when you bought it?
No,
Does it have air conditioning
it
now?
has window units,
It has window units.
yeah,
Okay.
the removable ones.
And then the other heat is electric baseboard?
Correct.
Okay. Other problem I saw in that house, which is a problem, is the location of the electrical panel. Have you addressed that issue?
The one that's in the kitchen,
The one that's in the kitchen, correct?
addressed where it is, you meant by moving it.
But where is it right now?
It's in the same location.
It's in the same location because it was in a cupboard that you had to open the door, take things out of the cupboard to get to the access door, and code requires a 3-foot unencumbered space in front of an electrical box. That was one of the reasons when I was working with the real estate agent, I said, you got to change this. I mean, that's just so far, out of line. And so you haven't changed that, is it still in the closet?
We have not changed the location, but
Still seems.
So it does not meet code, it's not accessible. Easily accessible, particularly for someone that's renting, and that, if there's an electrical problem or whatever, they need to, even as a renter, I mean, most renters have some idea of what to do in a situation like that, but if things not visible, to me, that's a life-saving problem and should be addressed.
okay.
Also, did the house have a deck when you bought it?
It had a small deck,
Yeah, we're in the process of that right now, getting the permit.
getting the
You're
permit
right.
for that.
We're in the process of the permit right now.
You're in the process.
Yeah.
Is the deck there though?
Yes,
So you built the deck and didn't have a permit?
correct.
Yep.
Why did you build the deck without permit?
Because it's, I thought I could do it because we're out in the country and it's freestanding. And
You're out of the country?
well, it's like,
Yeah.
you're not residential, I mean, I'm sure you can go to any other house out in the country.
I'm
Well,
sure.
we have codes out here just like everybody else.
Oh, and we're looking,
And being in the country doesn't really answer the question.
Have you applied for a
Yes,
permit?
yep,
Has it been approved?
we're, no, we're in
They're-
the process.
They're looking at it now.
But,
They have it now.
but the deck has not been approved.
Correct.
Okay, so
They have all the
there could be a
paperwork.
safety hazard with the deck because it hasn't been approved.
Yeah, we're in the process of getting the permit for that, yes. That's correct.
But it does not.
It does not
It's
currently
built without a
have one.
permit, and right now, it has not been approved by the building officials, so we don't know the condition of that deck, whether it was built to code.
Okay, we got that. What else do you know?
How long has it been on Airbnb?
Since beginning of April.
Okay, so you've been renting it,
We've had it up, yes, because like I said, we got the letter about a week after it was up, and then, like I said, I made the calls as soon as I got the letter that same day in terms of what we needed to do to be in compliance. Sent in the piece to the treasurer in terms of the business, talked to Sharon about what was required for the quarterly taxes, and that was the piece, so when I did research on this, I of course knew about the local taxes, and we were prepared for that and fully supportive, but the special use permit was what we had to get more information about and make sure that we were going through that process. So I called Michelle right away, got the permit application, asked some questions about the things that we need to put on that, and I did specifically ask, well, we have this up, we didn't know about this, and right when you put it up, right, people can run the place and have that out there, and people plan months ahead. So I asked about that and said, well, what about the ones that we've already committed to? And I was told that as long as I had the application in with all of the paperwork and the requirements and had that on file, then we could go through this process.
is that correct, Rachel?
So we're doing.
As far as I remember.
Okay, so you,
She's got a gumball in her mouth. Oops, she wasn't.
oops, all the time.
But you paid
Oh,
the
you're
taxes for the, so how many
April,
times
correct.
have you only began this in April?
Correct.
So then you've
So
had
the taxes
a month and a half, 2 months that you've been doing this.
Yes, so the taxes were paid, I paid in April, and then the next one's due July 20th.
Quarterly.
Yes.
Okay. How many, the house is rented for how many people?
We're doing 6 max.
6 max,
Mhm.
okay? And how do you handle your check-in?
How do we do the check?
Your check-in?
Oh, the check-in. So we're actually doing that by lockbox at this point. So we connect with the people online. We have clear directions up there. And we also have, so they have our personal contact information. My husband comes up, George comes up and does everything beforehand. And actually we did the handoff with the first 2 that we did in person. And then we've got 2 local contacts that we can contact if anything happens. So we can be out here within a little over an hour, but then we have 2 local contacts if there's
Who are they?
the Settles are one, Lee Settles, and then we have David Smoot, the other.
How do you ensure that the number is 6?
Well, one, by what is being advertised, and then we have communication. So Airbnb, one of the reasons we like that site is because you can do a really clear vetting of who comes in, right? So they have to have certain checks to even get on the Airbnb site, and then we can add in additional requirements, which we have done on the site. So they have to tell you when they're signing up to want to rent your place, they have to tell you what the purpose is and how many people. And they actually have a thing on there too where it is, they have to identify if there's going to be kids, how many adults, that kind of thing. So you have a back and forth in terms of, okay, here are house rules, here are the things that have to be agreed to before you can actually run. So that's how we verify.
Have you read your reviews on Airbnb?
Yes.
Okay, because I read them also.
Yeah, and can I clarify, because I know what you're going to bring up. So we're doing the maximum 6
Oh, wait a
when
minute.
that was.
Can I
Okay.
go through the reviews?
Sure.
Let's see, here's from May of 2018. We had 8 people staying in the house. I mean, everybody loves the house. I get that, but we had 8 people staying in the house. Another, May 2018. We had a group of 8, and all of us fit comfortably. April of 2018, a large group of 9. And also in April of 18, Great Escape was perfect for a mini multi-family spring break. Multi-family may indicate more than 6 people.
Well, that one was 6. I have all that.
And I've also heard that perhaps people were bringing in RVs and staying in RVs on the property.
So I can address both of those. So the 6 max, when we got the email about, like I said, the hearing was going to happen, and Michelle wrote all the other pieces that needed to be happening, the 6 max, the safety features. I changed it immediately to make sure that was being reflected in terms of the amount of people and putting those new requirements in. When I first had this up, you're right, we didn't have the number on there because we also have a pull-out couch and there's room for that. So that's why you're seeing that for those reviews. The piece on the RVs, so again, we have clear house rules that are up about the, like, no events, the no hunting, we had all of that laid out, even before we were asked to add in some other pieces to this. The RV piece that I think you're referring to, and which was brought up at in the comments that were given last week, we, as I said, use the property quite often. And so last year, and we've had a couple times, my husband has a whole group of veteran friends that apparently, they do not get together very often since they fought 2 tours together in Iraq, okay? And the only time we have ever had an RV on that property is when we had a few of his friends come out, Army buddies that are from around the country, and one of them has an RV that came up from North Carolina and stayed there for the weekend. That is it. We have it very clear in the house rules and other places that is not allowed on the property. For our personal use, that's a very different story.
That was for a personal.
That was personal use. That has never happened with.
Okay.
And I just want to address some of the other pieces too from last week. It was brought up about safety. I just talked to you guys about one of the reasons we like Airbnb and how we can actually vet people and all that, because we care about the place too. We care about the area, and this is not something where we want crazies to come in. We don't want people messing with our property. Like I told you, we've worked very, very hard. 1, to be able to get it. 2, to be able to bring it up to working order where it's a place that we're proud of, that we care about, that we invested in, and that we want to be here for the long term, right? So we don't want that. 2, it was brought up about insurance, and we have ample insurance. We have the house covered on a part-time rental in case anything happened. Airbnb also has a $1 million policy for that, for the renters that go through. That's another reason that I like using the site. And then we've talked about, I said, the safety piece and then making sure that it is clear what the boundaries are and that there is no trespassing. Because George and I are very much about that too. We have people that are coming on our property without permission, and that drives us crazy, right? We're trying to figure out how to do that. So we make it really clear with those that we talk to, and that's why we work closely with the settles and others to make sure they're watching our property on a daily basis. And they will tell us if something happens with that, and we would be very serious about taking all of this down and not doing any of this if there was an issue with that. So that's something that we feel very strongly about.
Ron, I did have one question for you. Did the realtor that you're talking about, who was in it?
What?
You were talking about a realtor that you've been in the house with?
Yeah.
Is that your wife?
No.
Oh, okay, just checking.
So Sherry
Okay.
Woodward was the realtor.
No, I didn't know.
Right.
I thought maybe she was involved.
So the RV was your RV?
Personal, yes.
And
That was
like, but you wouldn't have ATVs and stuff
No.
like that because
For renters, no.
people get out and they just think they can go hoop and holler.
Absolutely.
And one of the other safety features that we've looked at with some of the other ones is,
Well,
we're still talking,
we're still talking.
is they feel like they can get out there and build a bonfire
Mhm.
and then have a little bit of drink, a little bit of wine, and
Mhm.
then you can go and watch the fire. So I'd like to see that there be no
Outdoor fires.
outdoor fires because we had that problem.
Okay. Well, we do have an outdoor fire pit that has the cement.
It was
what do you call it?
pre-existing.
Yeah, pre-existing.
Can we have outdoor fires in the fire pit?
It's concrete,
Yeah.
10 feet.
Are we ready to do the public hearing?
I think.
Would you?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on this application?
Yes. My name's Ed Timberlake. I have the property directly to the, I guess, south of their property. I'm at 331, that's my
That's your
state.
state.
Exactly. I've never met the nice couple, and I'm here as a good neighbor. Everything I have to say is not directed at them, but it's directed at the process right now. And I'm asking for a no vote, probably won't get it, a rejection. However, I am asking for 4 counts at least of the table, even though you got the lecture, you don't want to drag this out. First one, I put in my comments that I thought I had enough time even though you missed the notification by statute. I had 2 days, working days for the first meeting, 7 total days. I thought I could do it. I was not going to bring that to the table. However, I looked at your agenda and you're going to vote on something that I did a lot of research on the county codes and everything else, and the agenda is going to change it all perhaps. So I'm caught short again after 7 days of research to worry about moving goalposts. I made all my comments, and now I don't know what you're going to change. So I'm kind of groping in the dark on how to address the issue. The third one is, and I don't mean this as a personal attack, but there is something called a conflict of interest. And last week, 2 people were very proud of having Airbnbs. And in having Airbnbs, there's a word called recusal. Quite frankly, if you have a direct tie to the issue by whatever standards of conduct, you should step out of the voting. You voted on that one. I understand you have an Airbnb, at least you mentioned it here. I don't know if you do or not. Somebody else said the same
Two
thing.
on this board or
Mr. Byrd, last week.
I have.
on the planning board?
Yeah, and he voted, okay, I think that's a standard of conduct issue. Finally, and I'll keep it short, I have a lot of questions in my research, and this is not my neighbors. This is for the county of Rappahannock. And in doing deep dives, this is what I found why you have to have in your planning meeting, whatever you call it, on July 11th, that's why I'm on the table, is I got a bunch of questions and I'll publish them. But one of them is, are all the properties you're voting on compliant with ADA? Are you putting people in this county, in renters, that are not compliant with the Americans with Disability Act? I was the first secretary of the VA. We were deaf, even on the Fort Myer O Club, that wouldn't let paralyzed veterans in because they weren't compliant with ADA. That's a big deal. So you better, get that in your agenda. Second question of many is, will the proliferation of Airbnbs take long-term affordable housing out of the market? There was a study in Bloomberg on May 3rd that reported that the cost right now of the rental properties in New York, based on Airbnb, the cost to the housing market was $616 million. The study found that owners who list their apartments for short-term stays essentially are removing these homes from the rental market. reducing the supply of housing and pushing up the cost of what remains. Will the law of unintended consequences kick in which people with long-term leases, lease ends, they make more money B&Bs, boom, they're out. That's a sad thing. Finally, several others, will put RVs in campers, you covered that. I don't know what the general rule is for the county though. My neighbors, I'll trust them, I believe their word, that's, issue's over for me. But what does the county think about Airbnbs and camping and all that stuff? I don't know. Finally, what's your mechanism for enforcement? You know, where do you go if you have a problem with this? I understand tourism, I understand the need for this, and I understand variances. However, to close, because I'll be real quick and I talk fast for some reason, this is how I grew up. If you don't have a no vote, at least vote to table it. Because by your own laws, Rappahannock County citizens should only allow these in commercial districts. That toothpaste may be out of the tube, by the way. I just don't know. The entire issue is not ready for a vote and should be further studied and debated with full transparency because of the massive repercussions of this decision for long-term benefit or detriment to Rappahannock County. I really think your study group is a good idea. Codify more, protect the renters, protect the people with the property, protect everybody. And since I have one more minute, I guess, I did do a deep dive on Airbnb vetting. As a lawyer, any lawyer in the room, take a look at it. If, may, could, shoulda, woulda, yada, yada, yada. What they've done on their website is really, it sounds great, but they dump the liability off Airbnb onto the people renting or to the person renting. Now remember, the way they say it is, if we get the name, in America, 60 million people last year had their background compromised. I had mine, I'm sure. The Army sniper had his when OPM sent a letter saying they had a clearance. China has all your stuff. So there were 16 million cases last year in America of identity theft. So people can show up, name, perfect credentials, and not be that person. So the whole county, as many other counties in the country, should really focus on this and start codifying to protect all concerned. That's all I ask. Table the vote, come back to it, we see what happens on the 11th. And again, this is not directed at my neighbors. They just put me in this room.
What happens on the 11th?
Aren't you doing a working group or something like that? Didn't that come out of the meeting?
The planning commission is having a meeting on the 11th to go over the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance, which has been prepared to, been copied and printed to be amended.
But there wouldn't be.
I just heard, see, I'm groping it, 7 days.
That's fine.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
How about those kids?
There being nobody else, I'm closing
They
the
keep them
public
so
hearing.
popular.
Okay, well, do we have a motion to start out with?
I'm still a little confused on the
To do something.
information that Michelle gave out as far as when they applied for the permit. Because my thinking is, if you don't have a permit, you can't rent the property. And if you know that you need a permit, yet you continue to rent the property, that basically is a violation of the zoning ordinance, which you can be cited on. Is that not correct, Michelle?
I mean, I was just trying to work with the applicants since they were going through the process.
Right, but, I mean, is that in the, that's not written into the process, that, you know, once you apply, that you can begin, you know, you.
That's not standard practice. If the application was denied and they continued, then they would be given a notice of violation.
But what about in the meantime, you're continuing to rent it?
That's
Well,
my point.
we put blocks on the date, so what we still honored were the ones that, like I said, right when you put it up, people do long-term vacations, right, so people do long-term planning. So people had blocked dates, and then when we got more information about the process, we blocked dates out, we blocked it so nobody else could
So how many do you think you have coming in? Upcoming?
We have 4 that we have committed to, that are
Oh.
booked. 4 separate
Couples.
renters, yeah.
And you've had, what, 7,
8.
8?
Yeah.
Okay. But that's in, I mean, that's basically like been every weekend, right?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
April and May were very busy. Yes.
So what do they need to do?
I'm concerned that we've got a deck that's not permitted, that's not checked for code, that could fall down, which I'm sure it's got good pilings and all of that. But then people are gonna walk out on the deck and go, oh, look at how wonderful this deck is.
So we're happy to, I mean, like I said, we have that on the works. We just talked to people today. I mean, sent more things in. Who are you talking to? No, for the permit. Who are you talking to?
Marlene.
So we're happy to keep you guys posted. I'm gonna send an email, give you a call as soon as we get, they're making they've asked for additional information, which we sent in, and they're coming out to actually do the inspection. We have, the checks are in, all of that's in terms of what's required to go through that process. So I'm happy to contact you as soon as they come out and like they say, if that could be a condition of approval.
I'd be reluctant to approve it until we're aware that the deck, in fact, does meet the building code.
And now that we're aware that the electrical panel is not to code, or that seems to be a problem.
Does this seem like a table type of issue?
I believe we should probably table it. I'll make that motion. And I think basically, I would not be comfortable in passing on it until I had information from the building official that the electrical panel is, in fact, does meet the code.
Okay, so is that your motion?
No, I'll make a motion to table.
Okay, and then
To win. Till next
Okay, let me refine my motion. I'll make a motion to table until we have received information that, in fact, the deck has passed the building code inspection and that the building official has looked at the electrical panel and approved its location.
so we get a letter from the building official or something?
Yes.
I guess we'll go to Michelle and she would
We'll probably get that, couldn't we?
communicate.
Okay, but we do have to table it to a specific time. So
We'll table it till the next meeting, we'll see if it's done, and if it's not, then we'll
Right.
table it, or we won't untable it. Who's our resident expert on Robert's rules here?
that seems reasonable.
I mean, is that gonna be enough time with 30 days for you to get it all? Okay. I second it.
Inspector on the deck.
Okay, I second it.
Is there any further discussion on that? All in
Yeah, I would like to discuss it. I have to say that and no offense, folks, and no offense to Michelle, and I assume everybody had the best of intentions, with which the road to hell is paved. I think that we have a situation in the county of people absolutely have no respect for what's in our zoning ordinance. They don't comply with it. They do pretty much whatever they want to do. As Ron pointed out in an email to me, we had a county administrator for 35 years who said famously, we have a complaint-driven enforcement mechanism for the zoning ordinance. So if nobody complains about something, there's no enforcement, there's no investigation, there's no nothing. And the result of it is this, and again, no offense to you people, because we've got it with this sign, or whatever it is this week, or next week, it's being called. Somebody just thought it was a great idea, and they went and did it, and then, when the zoning administrator wrote them a letter and said, hey, you're supposed to get a permit for that, they feigned some great shock and surprise that they had discussed it with their neighbors and next door people and down the street, and everybody thought it was great, and they, I didn't know how to get a permit, and now it's up. So now it's up. First, I couldn't tell you how much time I have spent doing the research and the homework and all that on that issue, get prepared for last month's meeting and again for this month's meeting. And now we've got a different thing. Now we're going to go back to hear an appeal about it. And it takes a lot of time for members of the board who could be doing something else, including nothing. That's one thing. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to the community. We have this ordinance and it ought to be enforced. And whether it's the sign business, whether it's, this other B&B down off of 211 on Christmas Tree Lane, where they put up whatever they put up and then come in for a permit, it's wrong. And I'm sorry, folks, I agree with what Mr. Mackellar said. If you don't have a permit, this ordinance says you can't do these uses unless it's in the ordinance. And if it's in the ordinance by special use or special exception permit, which this is, you can't do it till you get the permit. And if you didn't know you had to get a permit, that's your problem, not the board's, not your neighbors or not anybody else's. You can't do this. What you're doing is illegal. It's flat out illegal.
David, you have expressed yourself 2 or 3 times over, and I do feel it is only fair to these applicants to say that when they were, when they learned that they were against the, in contraindication of the zoning ordinance, they did make efforts to try to accommodate it, and they are here today as...
Okay, fine. I'm just saying during the pendency of this, when it's tabled, until they get their permit, I don't think we should just say, oh, okay, well, keep on renting it. I mean, you've got 2 different people on the board who have pointed out their concern about 2 different safety violations or potential ones. I don't know what kind of...
I think it's also, it is only fair to say that we are a board of zoning appeals. We are not a building inspection
Well,
board.
why don't we do this? Let's vote on this motion to table.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You can go for it. You understand what you need to do.
Yes.
In 3 days.
Well, it's the 4th Wednesday, it's our meeting. Oh, July.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got the resolution for Bill Anderson. Actually,
Yeah.
Would you like to read it aloud?
you want me to read it?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a member, Bill Anderson, who served on this board for, I think it was about 13 years.
No.
Well, 12 years. Okay. And he recently resigned his position, and Ron Mackellar, sorry, is his replacement, or took his place.
You can call me James Lipton.
Sorry, James. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. Well, anyway, so I'm going to read this motion. It's just a resolution of appreciation. Whereas William Bill Anderson has served on the Rappahannock County Board of Zoning Appeals as representative for the Jackson District from November of 2005 to March of 2018. Whereas Bill Anderson's dedication to his responsibilities, his collegiality, his concern for the community, and his dedication to sound land use planning in Rappahannock has been manifest through all of his years as a member. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Zoning Appeals for Rappahannock County does hereby express its sincere appreciation and thank Bill Anderson for his long and distinguished service to the board and the county. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the minutes of the Board of Zoning Appeals of Rappahannock County and that a presentation copy be provided to Mr. Anderson. adopted June 27th, 2018, and it is signed by all of the members here. Thank
Do we need
you. I
to
didn't make too many mistakes.
pass the resolution? or-
Oh,
I will make a motion as his replacement to pass the resolution.
And I will second it because he was certainly a gentleman and a very thoughtful.
And I will ask if there's any further discussion, because I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
See how unanimous we are?
Yes. Magnanimous or unanimous?
Unanimous. Okay, so the next item is a discussion of modifications, et cetera. And this has been coming around for a while. Do we have any specific interest to do something today? Would we like to try another work session? We were gonna have one, but it wasn't.
Yeah, we didn't have time because it's Memorial Day. So anyways, I now have the list, so should that ever happen again, I have the list, so I can give out the notice, but I didn't have the list of who was supposed to be notified by email, so.
Okay.
I don't know, I guess I'd like to hear something from Mr. Byrd, our representative on the planning commission, of I guess two things, because I was at the meeting a little while, and obviously the rest of you weren't. Maybe you watched it, I don't know, but what did they specifically decide to do? And two, are they even aware that we're doing this? And three, do you think it's worthwhile for us? I mean, are they gonna listen to anything we tell them? And do you think we ought to get it in before their meeting on the 11th? It doesn't matter.
We could.
Basically, as my understanding of the situation is that quite a long time ago, on the order of a year or more, we went through, the planning commission went over the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance to amend, modify, or change any of those documents. And it was done by public meetings at work sessions of the planning commission with the help and oversight of the public.
You're talking about when the last planning, comprehensive plan was created?
Pardon me?
Are you talking about the last comprehensive plan, or are
No,
you talking about the
this is a
in-between?
review of the,
Okay.
and it's supposed to be reviewed, I think, every 5 years.
Right,
And this was the review. It was quite overdue when we did this, and now it's more overdue than it was
because the
then.
last one was done in 2004, and I was on that work committee,
Okay,
and
well
we did the town hall meetings.
No, wait, you're talking about the comprehensive plan.
That's
This
right.
is the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance.
Okay,
Both
so
of
this
them.
is part of it.
Both of them. And so we have just gotten back the corrected and printed copy. I think Michelle knows more about that than I do. But that has been, that is available now, and so that it can be looked at and edited, corrected, and amended as it is so written now. And that there was going to be a meeting the 11th of July by the Planning Commission, a public meeting, and it seems unreasonable to think that all of that oversight, correction, and amendment is going to get done in one meeting. So,
I agree with that.
and so it seemed to me as a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals that what we were trying to deal with tonight was the fact that, particularly as it pertained to tourist homes, the definitions in the zoning ordinance really were not accurate or appropriate to what we are trying to understand and permit at the moment. And that what I thought we were going to try to do tonight was to give an advisory note or communication to the supervisors to at least modify the zoning ordinance so that it pertained to the present situation with respect to tourist homes, so that we could reasonably pass on them and either permit or not permit, however that was done. And it seemed that basically there were two significant problems. One had to do with what a short-term rental was, and in the present zoning ordinance, it's a tourist home is something that is rented for a week or more, whereas the situation we're dealing with at the moment, I think, is mostly weekend rentals, 2 days or so, 3 days perhaps during 3-day weekends. And to amend the ordinance so that that is what we are going to be allowing. And the other, I think, has to do with the acreage requirements for bed and breakfast institutions or tourist home rentals. If other people have different perceptions of it.
Now, why were we getting into the acreage?
The acreage, I think that is something, as it is now, the acreage is by the previous zoning ordinance.
10 and 20.
No, I don't think it was.
It was 2 and 5.
No, I think
But
the
they
2
threw
and
that
5
out
was
because it
bad.
wasn't
I was gonna say,
properly
it was-
adopted.
what got thrown out because it was not.
I don't think it was properly thrown out there.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It was not challenged within the statutory period of time.
Well, whatever.
Okay, but I'm just saying,
So is it, so
It
which,
is.
which is it now?
It's what was adopted in
It's 2 and 5.
2010. No, it's not. It's
Yeah, it
5 and, it's 10 in agriculture and 20 in
I think he
conservation.
walked back that.
No, that's what Art said, that the amendments that were adopted in 2010 weren't lawfully adopted, so they're void.
Mr. Connick is correct.
No, he
I
did
think
say
he
that, but I'm saying he walked it back.
No, we didn't. What did
That's
they-
my
I think he did
understanding,
too.
yes.
That was my
No.
understanding. That
Yes.
If they
he
re-adopted, no, if
He
they
made
re-wanted
two,
to adopt
he
it.
had two different opinions on the subject.
And that's a
Second,
that's a good lawyer.
He had
Only
first,
two, not three.
the first one had to do, as I remember, with the advertising of the initial meeting in 2010,
Right.
as to whether that was properly done. And the second opinion had to do with the fact that for the ordinance to be found invalid, it had to be complained against and decided on within 30 days of the adoption, which was in 2010.
And it wasn't challenged.
That was not challenged and decided against.
I never saw that. When did he say that? Or when was that?
I guess we could clarify that.
Do you know?
I spoke with him yesterday about this subject. As of yesterday, it was his opinion that it's 10 acres.
In agriculture and 20. Right,
Because it
because,
says in
because there's a
agriculture
case.
and commercial zones, the minimum acreage requirement shall be 10 and 20.
right, that's the way it
Provide-
was in 2010. In
Prior to-
2010,
And because the strike through is 2 and 5.
they amended it in 2010, and they didn't properly advertise, and contrary to what Mr. Bird just said about what Mr. Sharp just said, there's a case that says if you don't properly advertise the amendment, if it's passed, it's void ab initio for failure to advertise. So it doesn't matter whether you appeal it in 30 days or you appeal it in 300 days or 300 years. If it's void ab initio, it's void ab initio from the start.
Okay,
Never,
so-
like it never happened.
Okay, so back to my original question.
And that's what his original opinion was.
Let's just,
so
okay,
I
let's
don't know
just,
about it.
let's suppose it is 10 and, I mean,
That-
5 and 10.
No, it's 10 and 20 now.
And it says there can be a,
Okay, so let's suppose it's 10 and 20.
They're talking about re-amending it back to 5 and 10.
Okay, so what
They're
you're
talking
saying.
about,
5 and 2, right?
2.
or 5 and 2,
Five and
I don't know,
two.
whatever it is.
Okay,
Two.
What did
and
I say,
five.
5 and 10?
You said 10.
I meant 5 and 2, right, sir?
but what is this here? This
I
is,
can't keep on my glasses.
okay, well, this is,
you don't have your glasses? Oh, look at that.
okay.
Okay, now I have this one.
Okay, so this
These are
change,
good.
this isn't really a change. That's not really a change, right?
But then it was an addi, they wanted.
No, this is what I proposed, I proposed to put it back the way it was, but then, in light of Art
This
Goff's
is-
opinion,
This 170.
he basically said that the amendment in 2010 was not valid, so it doesn't need to be changed.
So why are they considering going to 2?
Because that's an old
No.
sheet that we have that is from, why are they?
Why are they
Because I
considering to
guess
go
the
to 2
people-
and 5?
Man, I don't know, ask Chris Parrish, he's the great
Okay.
leader of that.
Okay. But what, how are we weighing in on that?
I don't know whether we are weighing in on.
I mean, it seems to me the idea about our meeting tonight and discussing this is that we need to figure out what we perceive as the problems with the ordinance and how it would be better done,
Well,
and give that advice to the Board of Supervisors so that we could hear and permit these applications better than we are now.
I mean, I agree, because we're just,
Well, the only thing.
I like to be consistent and that everybody can feel that they get a fair shake from us. But right now, there's so many it seems like there's different variables that keep coming up. And so we need to make sure that we are consistent.
The
Well,
only thing, well, maybe I can talk too. The only thing that I see as the major problem is this definition. And right now, that has caused Mr. Connick heartache in several applications if the person happens to mention that they would be renting it for less than a week. Then you've been saying, well, we can't grant the application or the permit. I would argue that when a definition says generally something, and it was written 30 years ago, it's trying to capture what is considered the common practice. That is not the practice, it never has been, to my knowledge. So we need to change that. If there could be one specific change that would clarify the ordinance, would be to say that a tourist home is generally less than a week rental, short-term rental, and it's.
Or suppose we say less than a month.
well, we-
Honestly, I don't think it matters, but it's what it says. Now,
Exactly.
I mean, if we're gonna make a recommendation, I don't think in terms of the neighbors, in terms of the use, in terms of the traffic, in terms of the toilets, in terms of the septic, in terms of the well, or any other, the noise, anything else. First of all, the longer the people are there, probably the better it is because they sort of try to blend in, I guess, than if they're just there for 2 days. But I don't think it matters, generally speaking.
Okay, but
Wait
you,
a minute, that's number one.
but you have voted against applications on that
Because
basis.
I don't think that what the tourist home, like the two things that we had tonight is to me not a tourist home, period. Whether it's 7 days or 2 days or anything else, it's not a tourist home. It's a short-term rental of a single-family dwelling, not a tourist home. Anyway, that's my view.
We could change.
All right, the definition needs to be fixed, in my opinion, to make it clear that what these people are applying for is allowable, and in what zones it's allowable, because I don't think it's necessarily appropriate in all zones. Number two, I think we need to make a distinction in the definition of a tourist home or whatever you want to call it, a short-term rental, where people are there, where the owner is on the premises, or like what you have, where you're on an adjacent unit or I guess dwelling house, and so you're there to supervise and sort of I guess, act as a referee if you need to. I mean, if things get out of control, someone's there, as opposed to
Independent.
what we heard tonight of both of these, which is a completely absentee owner who doesn't even live here, who's hours or maybe more away, is not available, does not know the people, doesn't let them in, isn't there to supervise what's going on, etc.
The lockbox concept.
Well, right.
is-
And I think, I mean, I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read it, and honestly, I just skimmed it, but I heard Mr. Timberlake's comments last week at the Planning Commission, and I think the kind of concerns that he raised there are exactly appropriate and ought to be reflected in A, the definitions, and B, the zones and the areas and the minimum lot size where this kind of a use is allowed, because I know you don't agree with me, Chris, but the fact of the matter is, it's a commercial use. That's where it's listed in the ordinance. And it does make a difference if you have, 52 different neighbors next door every year, or 20, or 30, as opposed to somebody that moves and buys the house and lives there all the time. And if you have an issue, you go and you talk to them and you say, hey, that's a problem, what's going on? And then they live there, so they're more responsive, more reactive. You've said, to your knowledge, and you said at the Planning Commission, no, there's never been a problem. It's never been reported to police, and Gary Light said the same thing. We heard here tonight that, well, apparently somebody did call the police. And I just want to say, since we were talking about, good old Rappahannock County, I've lived here, I don't know how, well, I guess we'll do the math, 40-some years. I never called the police about anybody on anything, because it's Rappahannock County. If it's really a problem, you put on your big boy pants and you go over there and you knock on the door and say, yo.
That's why.
And if it's really bad, you say, yo, if you don't do something about it, Frank or Harry or Charlie or whoever, if you don't stop, I'm going to call the cops then. But you don't just call, nobody just calls the cops. Come on. That's what they do in Fairfax.
Well,
So-
I would say that up at Chester's Gap, over the years, we have heard a number of places where they had the weekend rentals and so forth, where they were calling the sheriff's department because they were noisy, they were moving it up, they were taking
Right, well,
belly dives into the
I hear what
hot
you
tubs.
say, and I hear what people report or don't report, and all I know is my experience is down the shore. And down the shore, people have the same thing, it's, weekly rentals, and like I've said before, I get up to go fishing at 3:30 in the morning by half the time, because they're still out drinking and carrying on 3 or 4 doors down and wake me up, and so I say, well, if I can't sleep, I might as well go fishing. So, you say you haven't had these problems, but as they proliferate, you get more and more people, and they say they're vetted. I don't know. But that, it only takes one to create a problem. And anyways, I think all that stuff should be taken into consideration of what kind of neighborhood it is, and more specific delineation of where it's allowed and where it's not allowed, because it is a commercial use and it changes the neighborhood. I mean, if one does it, maybe not, but if then 2 or 3, and pretty soon, as we've heard from some people who commented at public hearings, there are towns up in New England, on the shore or wherever, that are now, nobody lives there anymore, they're all vacation rentals. And it's that way down in Nag's Head and places like that. And look at our annual report, or look at every meeting. That most of what we have done over the last year, I think we had one variance application of a couple of apartments, and most of the activity of the Board of Zoning Appeals has been these tourist homes.
One of the things, a couple of things I'd like to say is, of course,
Wait a minute, I'm not done, I got 2 more things. All right, the next category of things I think that we need to address is all these safety standards. And Ron did a great job tonight about some of these things about fire. I don't know about fire extinguishers,
you don't have them on your boat?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay, hold on.
But
That's point.
those things aren't listed, and the things that are listed as the conditions that we're authorized by law to put on are to protect the neighborhood and the hours of operation and all that stuff. not to protect the people who are either owning the house and renting it out, or, renting it for the weekend and setting it on fire. Well, it's not our job to make sure they have smoke detectors and all
I
that
think
stuff.
They are
There's certain
required in
basic-
hotels.
Okay, but these aren't hotels.
No, but then it's a similar commercial
Well, it's,
operation.
okay, but then it's not, but that's not our job. If that's in the hotel business, then that's up to them. Or that's up to the building official. But if you want to do that, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, I'm saying then we ought to put that in the general terms and conditions or whatever it is. And
agree.
have it as a thing that you have to comply with. And that'll get rid of all this stuff. You have to have insurance, you have to have fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, make up the list, whatever, it's already done pretty much, but put it in the ordinance so people can read it and they know, and they don't come here and say, what? Nobody told me that. Where did you start making up this stuff? Well, we started making it up, we shouldn't be making it up. We should have it as a standard thing and put it in the ordinance.
That's one of the consistencies that I think
All right.
we need to have,
And-
is that it's a standard list.
And that it should be also inspected, because some of these places, they may not have been, they may have been inspected when they were built, and many of them were built before we had any inspections, so they've never been inspected, they don't have any certificate of occupancy, and it ought to be a routine thing, that before you can even advertise it for a hearing, you've got to get the building official to go there and give you a certificate of occupancy for whatever it is you're proposing, according to and that covers your smoke detectors and all that stuff. And the health department, same thing. You have to do that before you even advertise for the
Well,
hearing.
I think,
Put that in
That
the
was
ordinance.
next.
okay.
Right,
but-
one last thing, and that is the roads. You can't have it on substandard roads. You can't have it, and that's one of the things that's in the
It's a
list.
safety.
Because of like Harmony Manor was the one that went to court. The current ordinance says it should have, not it shall have, it should have a 50-foot right-of-way. We already discussed it, so I'll leave it at that. We have to designate something that is the road that's built, not a right-of-way, because that's just a piece of paper with some dotted lines on it. Not what's built. It could be a 50-foot right-of-way with 2 tire tracks.
Okay, Jennifer wants to.
Go ahead.
I am in full agreement that we need to talk about zones. We talk about commercial, this is a commercial business. One of the ways we have businesses in this county is cottage industries, cottage businesses. Someone was in here not long ago and she wanted to make jellies and jams, so she needed to get a permit to do that. My husband has a cottage business with his architecture, and we have a number of people. So in one sense, there's a part of this that looks like it could be a cottage industry in certain areas. And so, because it's just a very low impact. And so you have to look about that impact and maybe level out what the commercial is. If it's in village residential, then you don't need to have 2 acres to have an Airbnb. But you do need to have certain other things that are going on. We've got one that's going on next door to me, well, on the other side of the store, next door to me. So those are some of the things, but I do think that the list, a bona fide list of the safety things and road safety is part of that. I voted against the processes going up there at Harmony, what's that called, Manor? Because I was concerned about the road, and they did put lay-bys and whatever else in there, but, so.
So what are we going to do? Now that we talked about it, is there a consensus? And we're going to write something and give it to the planning commission or the board of supervisors or who or what?
I think we need, I've read through this, and number one, it tends to be incredibly confusing for,
We need to
for the
streamline
normal
it,
person.
simplify it, and
Are
it
you
needs to
talking
be
about the
uploaded.
resolution?
I'm talking about this, yeah,
draft
this particular document here, but even, and this is based on the zoning document.
David, you came up with that, right?
But anyhow, it's just incredibly confusing. It's short-term rentals. Why do we have to define them as tourist homes, boarding house? Boarding house terms hasn't been used since the 30s for the most part. They don't, try to find.
But there
one
is a
someplace.
differentiation between if the owner is on the property
Absolutely.
versus distance.
Or not necessarily the owner, but the operator.
An operator
Yes.
who is there, right there, because we have a lot of them
Right, it could be an
Steps
employee basically that lives on the
A
property.
boarding house would be a long-term situation, like someone would live there for many months or years.
Correct, and that just doesn't really happen. I mean,
But somebody might,
is there a boarding house in Rappahannock? And, there used to be, that Jeff Butler's grandmother had a boarding house. The Fuller Brush Man stayed there.
okay.
The encyclopedia salesman stayed there. That
But
was long
like a
ago,
hotel.
and it doesn't happen anymore.
And that's why you can't get fuller brushes or an encyclopedia.
That's correct.
I use Wikipedia.
Well, it seems we have to begin to focus a little bit better. We've been worrying about everything short of meteor strikes. And
I worry about them.
so what it seems to me, at least from my experience, these Airbnb type short-term rentals.
I was gonna say, and that's something else also. Airbnb is a corporate name. There is no definition for Airbnb that addresses short-term rentals. They constantly use, and it's referring to.
Well, it's
One of the other points is, they come in here and say, we bought the land, it's so wonderful, blah, 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 and we didn't realize it was gonna cost us so much, so now we want to supplement our income by doing this. And it's practically everyone who's come in and said that, and their financial situation is not my concern. That they did not plan ahead or did not look at other contingencies, and so then they're standing here, and we thought we could just throw up a sign and put it up on the web, and it was okay, because we're out here in the country where it's all independent.
okay, but
Is those the
Jennifer, a question is, why is it in the ordinance?
What?
Why are tourist homes in the ordinance?
Because the tourist home is a thing like the thing down the Squareville, the old
No,
cab inn, that's
what
why
I'm
it's in
saying
there.
is, no, that's not a tourist home, that's a motel. What I'm saying is a tourist home is in the ordinance, somebody put it in there because they thought they were something that we wanted.
That's
Or
what
is it-
basically
No, they
all
don't.
short-term
They copied it
Still
from
not
Fairfax.
focusing effectively, I don't think, on the present situation, which is an internet-derived rental.
Well, or advertise on Craigslist, I mean, not
Okay,
Craigslist, Valley Trader, or,
Well, mostly,
Rappahannock
that
News
isn't, that mostly isn't what we're dealing with, and that the present situation is a new one that has happened since the internet. I would say 95% or more of the short-term vacation type rentals originate on internet websites, and they are generally of houses that aren't lived in, because if they were lived in, the people wouldn't want to rent them.
unless it's
And,
weekend.
or weekend, but even so, that is beyond the ability of most people to rent it and live somewhere else or whatever. So that,
How is that a zoning issue?
well, it's a zoning issue because it's in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, it's a
And
permit.
so we are trying to deal with this situation where, as for instance, the people who were here tonight have a house that they want to stay in a couple of weekends a month and would like to rent it out when they aren't here. And that is the kind of situation that we are going to find in this county. And that's kind of reality. And if we don't want to have that, I think, one, there ought to be a good reason not to. And there ought to be a definition of what we want and what we don't want.
And some of that comes from the planning commission as they're looking at the comprehensive plan, and some of that comes from the board of supervisors.
But they
But
don't.
we're the
seem-
ones that, it sits on our laps.
Yeah, basically, we don't legislate, right? We just.
We're-
But what we're trying to
Based on
deal with
code.
is David's problem with what we have in the ordinance says one thing, and what is getting applied for is something else.
The reality.
But there isn't a good definition of what is getting applied for.
So to me, why don't we just focus on that and forget
Okay.
about the acreage and,
Okay.
the other, just what is the definition?
That's
And I
fine.
think if we can get that input into the planning commission, that's gonna be a lot better than a 30-page document.
Well, I just gave you all what I had done already, I mean,
No,
so.
but I mean, if we could
You
just,
wanna just use one paragraph?
And I will bring up also, which I brought up at the main meeting that wasn't recorded in the minutes, about the outdoor access people, and that is reality. We've got a chance right here to deal with that. I've done research, and I think, there's actually existing code in state code or whatever, and references that we can apply it, but short-term rentals are not just houses anymore.
Yeah,
They
it's-
are property, and that can be even worse, because people are bringing in campers, they can bring in their
Well, that's
ATVs.
regulated, if you have a trailer, because I just had this issue come up, there's a special use or a special exception permit in just about every zone, a trailer or overnight trailer accommodations or RVs or whatever, that's with hookups, or even the ones that don't hook up, or a tent campground, it's all regulated, it's all in there, it's a special exception permit now.
But
So you
but
can't-
those are commercial operations, this
No, it doesn't say
renting by
commercial.
outdoor access is the same concept as the Airbnb
Well,
or
let's say it's
internet.
special.
It's internet rental.
All right,
And they list, did you read the information I gave you? And that
I did, and
zone-
it's-
they can come in and fly, their drones or whatever, and like I said, live next door to that, compared to just some people that come in for the weekend to rent a house.
well, that's something new that maybe should be addressed, but it's.
That's
you know,
exactly what
It
I'm
needs
saying,
to
but
be
it could
addressed
be
because
addressed in a
Well, then you
short-term
need to,
rental.
but I think you need to go to the planning commission with that, I mean, good luck, because that's how this whole list got started. But I would like to ask.
We're making
Michelle,
recommendations,
wait a minute.
I mean, that's.
What is the story with this guy up in Flint Hill? He's the one that's advertising for it, he's the one that's in the one that, what's his name, Leeswanger?
Are you talking about High Meadow?
I mean,
Meadows and,
he's one, and then he's got another property out on
Yeah,
North Post Road or something, right?
Right.
Okay, he's advertising it for coming in and hunting and camping and all that stuff. What's being done about it?
I don't think
Anything?
there's
Are you
any-
aware
Or
of
is
it?
it addressed in the ordinance?
There's
Well,
nothing in the ordinance,
if they're
right?
camping, it's under tent
Or if
campground.
they're not camping?
But it's
Well,
something-
It's a whole variable.
What?
There's a 26 bed, it's 26 bed house up there. They could stay in
Well,
the house.
I don't know where they're staying, but I'm just saying based on what the ad that Ron gave us, that's what they're doing. They're renting out a couple hundred acres and saying you can do whatever you want for the weekend. You can camp, you can this, you can that. Well, to me, that's a commercial, they're getting money for it. It's a commercial operation, they have to get a special exception
And
permit
how
for a
is-
campground.
How is that different from renting your property to people who hunt and come and spend the night in a tent and then get up and hunt?
I don't see
Uh,
this.
What's the difference?
There may not be a difference, because that's exactly what they are doing, and the problem, let me finish,
No, but that's-
on this hunting, because it's a
So
big
common.
deal. On hunting, in the county, for the most part, the hunting is rented out to hunt clubs or whatever, and it's people that do it year after year after year. They're familiar with the property, they know where the houses are around and everything, so they're not just out there shooting willy-nilly in every direction. You start doing weekend rentals for hunting on property, and you're gonna have bullets flying everywhere. Because the people don't know. I mean, they're on a piece of property, they see the deer, boom, they shoot, and there happens to be a house on the other side of where they don't know.
Maybe there should be something about that, because I don't think at this current time there is any restriction on hunting on a piece of property.
No,
I think that's one
but
of
what I'm
my-
saying is that history is such that the hunting that is done for the most part in the county on these rental bases is people that are responsible hunters, and they rent it for the whole, they don't rent it for 2 days.
No, they
rent
rent it for the whole season.
They
Yeah,
rent it
but
for the
actually,
season.
there are people who rent a property for the season, and then they rent it to people who come in for weekends and hunt. That's.
Sublet.
Yeah,
Well, if they
sublet.
then we gotta deal with that too, because.
But
I
that
didn't know
is,
they were doing
that
that.
is fairly common. Yeah, because you can make so much money doing it.
Well, They
mean, that's-
you can make money doing lots of things, like I said, that doesn't negate the problem of what you're.
Well, no, but it's not in the ordinance, I would not think, so if it.
Well, I know, but maybe that's, the point is that we're looking at the ordinance.
Okay,
We're
well,
looking at the
we're
planning right there.
expanding our focus to the point that nothing is getting
No,
Correct.
accomplished. And what
Well,
it
let's
seemed
do
to me we were here to
definitions.
talk about tonight was to get the definition of a short-term vacation rental so that when people apply for such a thing, we can decide, can we permit or not permit it?
Yeah, let's just get the let's start small. Let's get the definition for a tourist home and a personal tourist home, or whatever you call it. No, I'm talking about the one that's probably gonna end up being allowed by right without any restriction.
Oh,
Which is if it's your primary residence, then it's a different animal from if it's not your primary residence.
That's what I think. I mean, just like we
But
used to.
I agree
We
with
used to
that.
have to get a special use permit to have a
Yeah.
temporary trailer at your place while you were building a house. And people came in, not so much anymore because the kind of people that are coming in Rappahannock have changed. But I can remember when I was zoning administrator, back before, I think Michelle was even born, I found out, which frightened me. Anyway, I went you at least once a month or once every 2 months. That's what we do. Instead of tourist homes, we were getting people that applied to have a temporary trailer on their place while they built their house. And finally I said, why are we doing this? You know, this is a ridiculous waste of our time and their time, and it costs like $200 or $300 to get, well, if it's only gonna be for 6 months or a year, just let the zoning administrator do it. And why do we have to have a hearing and no neighbors ever came and said anything?
You okay?
So,
no, I wanna go.
Okay.
yeah, we
Okay,
can.
well, let's.
So
let's-
anyway, I propose that if it's owner occupied and it is their permanent residence, and or it's not being rented out for more than X number of weekends a year, it should be, they file all the stuff, they show them they got the certificate of occupancy and the fire extinguishers and all that stuff. They show it to Michelle and they get a permit without coming to the board, period.
Why don't we have a work session?
A work session, and everybody write down your definition of these.
Yeah, everybody do something. 'cause I think
And-
we're right.
And we're gonna get it noticed properly, clerk or chairman,
Who
I
are you
mean,
talking to?
you,
Secretary.
secretary.
Yeah, we'll get it done. I mean,
Okay.
the last time you only gave me
Yeah,
3
when are we
days and
gonna
one of
do
them
this?
was a holiday.
Okay, so
And I didn't have the-
do we want to try it this next Wednesday or Thursday?
Wednesday's the 4th of July, and after
Oh, okay.
that I'm going to the beach, so.
And we
I
can't
hope-
do it before. Could we do it the following week, Monday?
I have to be here the 9th, so like the 10th or 11th might work.
The
When
11th
is
is the planning commission.
Oh, that's on the 11th, so you want to do it the 10th?
What day, what,
Tuesday,
Tuesday's.
or even Monday afternoon, I could do it.
what is Monday?
The
The
9th.
9th,
Yeah, I feel like I could do it on the 9th.
I could do it
feel
on
like
the
you could do it on the
I could do it.
Yes, I had something on the 10th, but I don't
How
know.
do you feel, Mr. Burke? You feel?
I'm gone that entire week, so I'm gonna have to leave you all to your own devices.
Oh, great.
Oh, you're not gonna be at the planning commission meeting?
No, I'm going to be in
Hey, can we have an alternate
Massachusetts.
person to go to it instead of you? Wouldn't that be a surprise?
What time? What time on the 9th?
That would start a
Okay, let's send Ron over
constitutional.
there.
That would start a constitutional crisis.
What?
What time on the 9th?
Did Mr. Kennedy resign today?
Yeah, what time?
The,
What time on the
the
9th?
Supreme Court justice?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I said, I thought he was dead. It's a different Kennedy.
Can you call in?
Where are we gonna have this? At the library? Let's have it there because that's easier to get than here. Tuesday there's.
It's a Monday,
What? Monday? Oh, we're having it Monday the 9th?
that's what I'm hearing.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, okay.
It should be open.
We can have it here, I think. Oh, no, Monday's term day, so, but I mean, court might be over by then. What time do you wanna have it?
In the afternoon, or what?
Well, I'll find out that, for Monday the 9th, we got plenty of time, so
I think
I'll
we've
find
also
out
got the,
if the judge is
use the
gonna be
room
going
at the,
to the library.
at the office, at your office now?
You can meet in the visitor center, as long as you're not expecting a crowd.
Well, how much of a crowd can?
So what time, in the
What time?
afternoon?
I don't know, I'm court in the morning at 10 or 11 o'clock, so I'll be done by 12, 1 o'clock.
So about 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock on the 9th.
I guess.
That'll work.
And we're gonna say where at the visitor center?
Well, I'll tell you now, whether the courtrooms, if we can have it here, let's have it here. It'll be done. I think the docket, the last I heard, there was nothing on the docket after 11 o'clock, so. So by 3 o'clock, I think there's.
We
we'll
can-
be done.
Oh, okay, and then what
How about
about,
Skype?
what about a representative that might plead our case to the planning commission?
You,
I could do it, I mean,
you can just go as chairman.
I mean, if you do it on Monday, they're gonna have the meeting the next day.
well, that's what I'm
And that would
saying.
be a help,
2 days.
that would be wonderful.
2 days.
2 days.
11.
Okay.
Wednesday, yes.
Okay, and then I can come if they'll let me talk.
Oh, Henry will be happy.
He will. Okay. Okay. Well, do we have a motion then?
I move to do that.
What are we doing?
What we just said, and have our meeting on the 9th, continue this meeting until the 9th at a location that I will be probably here, but if not, it'll be at the visitor center. And,
Okay, so in the courtroom if it's available, if not, it'll be at the visitor center.
right, 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
And it will be advertised when?
As soon as I find out whether we can have this or not, then I'll give 3 days. notice.
Yeah, okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
We do.
The minutes.
Yeah, we're continuing.
Oh, I'm sorry, a motion to continue.
For recess.
For recess.
I so move.
All right.
Is there a second?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, we forgot to do the minutes, we'll have to do them next time. Good night. Good night.